So I want you to picture this. It's the 18th century, and there's a ruler in India who has a secret weapon, a rocket force so advanced it actually terrifies the British Empire. This is a guy who's writing letters to Napoleon, trying to build a global alliance to stop colonialism in its tracks. Today, we are diving into the absolutely incredible story of Tipu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore. These weren't just some cool words he came up with. This was his entire philosophy for life. At a time when so many local rulers were just bending the knee to British power, this was his line in the sand. He was saying, I will never be a puppet, and I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees in my own kingdom.
And because of that fierce, defiant attitude, history has really struggled with how to remember him. To the British East India Company, he was this fanatical tyrant, a huge obstacle to their grand imperial plans. But to many of his own people in Mysore, he was a visionary, a protector. So which was he? A brutal despot or a freedom fighter? Well, as you're about to see, the answer is really not that simple.
To really understand the iron will of this guy, we have to go back to the very beginning. And his story doesn't start in some comfortable, quiet palace. No, it starts in the chaos and fire of the battlefield. He was born to a military genius who had actually seized power himself, so Tipu's whole education was this incredible mix of warfare, science, and how to run a state. And get this, at just 15 years old, an age when European nobles are still, learning the basics in some academy, Tipu was already on the front lines, literally leading cavalry charges against the most powerful corporation in the world. But it wasn't just his courage that made him such a threat. He had something else. He had a secret weapon, a piece of military technology that was light years ahead of anything his enemies had. Think about it. The British had this massive, well-oiled military machine that spanned the globe. So what could one single Indian kingdom possibly have that would strike genuine fear into these battle-hardened commanders? The answer lies in this number, 2 kilometers. That was the range of his best rockets. Now, to put that into perspective for you, most European cannons at the time could barely hit anything beyond 1 kilometer. He could hit his enemy from twice the distance, raining down fire before they could even get close enough to shoot back. And let's be clear, we are not talking about simple fireworks here. These were the world's first iron-cased military rockets. They were packed with gunpowder, sometimes with blades attached to the side. Their whole purpose was just pure chaos. They'd hiss through the air, completely unpredictable, and then explode right in the middle of enemy lines, breaking up cavalry charges and setting fire to everything. It was psychological warfare. The difference was just night and day. While European armies were dragging these heavy, slow cannons through the mud, Tipu had this mobile, long-range weapon of terror. And he didn't just invent it. He professionalized it. He created a dedicated corps of 5,000 rocketeers. He essentially invented a whole new branch of the military. Okay, so this amazing technology wasn't just for military parades. It was the absolute centerpiece of his lifelong, incredibly bloody struggle against the British, a fight that would end up spanning 4 different wars and would define his entire life. And this decades-long conflict was a true drama, with unbelievable highs and just devastating lows. In the First War, his father actually humiliated the British. In the second, Tipu himself won a major victory. But the third? That brought a crushing personal tragedy. He was forced to give up half his kingdom, and in a move designed to break his spirit, he had to hand over 2 of his own young sons as hostages. And this is what made him so incredibly dangerous to the British. He saw the big picture. While most Indian rulers were just focused on their own little regional fights, Tipu was thinking globally. He knew the British were a global power, and the only way to beat them was with a global coalition of his own. He was reaching out to everyone from Paris to Istanbul. But here's the other side of the coin. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a nation builder. He created a new calendar, new currency, and set up state-run factories to build everything from cannons to silk. He was building a strong, modern, economically independent state, which was a direct threat to the entire British model of colonial trade. Well, you can probably guess what happened next. The British simply could not allow this independent power to exist. They were determined to get rid of their greatest enemy once and for all. So, in 1799, they gathered a massive army for one final, desperate siege at his capital city. He was completely cornered, betrayed by some of his own men, hopelessly outnumbered. The British offered him a deal. They said, surrender and you can live out your life as a rich but powerless puppet. But for the man who chose to live like a tiger, that was a fate worse than death. There was no way he was taking that deal. He didn't hide in his palace waiting for the end. He went out and joined his men at the breach in the city walls, fighting hand-to-hand right until the very end. They found his body later, buried under a pile of other fallen soldiers, his sword still gripped tightly in his hand. But Tipu's death, that wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a different kind of war, a war on his legacy. The British didn't just conquer his kingdom. They set out to systematically plunder its very soul. The looting was just legendary. They took everything, his solid gold throne, his incredible mechanical tiger, all of it. These weren't just treasures, they were symbols of Mysore's identity. But the most valuable prize they stole was his technology. They shipped his rocket designs back to England, studied them, and then reverse-engineered them to create their own Congreve rocket, a weapon the British Empire then used to conquer the world. And that's why his story is still so powerful today. He represents one of the last great stands against colonial expansion in India. And it was a fight he waged not just with bravery, but with cutting-edge science, a global strategy, and this unshakable vision of what it meant to be independent. So how do we remember the Tiger of Mysore? As this heroic freedom fighter who pioneered rocketry, or as a complex, sometimes ruthless leader? You know, maybe the point isn't to pick a simple label. Maybe the point is just to grapple with his incredible story, a story of innovation, defiance, and what happens when a single tiger decides to stand in the path of an empire.